Looks like something's running. And we're live. Reeve?
Welcome again to EVE Online Talking in Stations. I'm Reeva, and I'm standing in for Matterall this week. Talking in Stations is a show for players about what is happening. Talking in Stations is a show for what is happening in and around the game. We got a great show lined up for you tonight with our usual panel of experts. Tonight, we're going to discuss the CSM voting results, and in the second half, we're going to talk about third-party tools. Tonight on our panel, we have Uzriel99, who is the CEO of Unified Research and Industrial and a Podside podcaster. We also have with us Dirk McGurk, who is the Bastion member and the noted meta pundit, and you see him on OpenCom's show. We have Drayden Torvir, who is also of Bastion and a notorious lurker. Caleb Aranya, market podcast and stream regular, and myself, Reeva. Thanks for joining us tonight. I really hope you enjoy the show. So, starting off with our first topic, guys, we'll talk about the CSM and the voter results which came out today. The first thing is that the CSM turnout this year is the lowest since CSM 4. And CCP have said that while we don't judge the council's effectiveness on the total number of votes cast, we take this as a sign that we need to make improvements in how CCP works with the CSM and how we promote elections. What do you guys think were the causes of the low voter turnout this year?
I think it's been pretty obvious why we've had low voter turnout. Just people becoming disconnected from the CSM, dissatisfied, everything you can possibly name about, why people might give up on caring.
I think one of the things that I heard was that a lot of people said there was no point in voting because obviously all the null block candidates are going to get on. So they didn't feel that there was any point in them actually bothering to vote at all. And I think this became a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in some way.
Well, I mean, that's forever a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because anytime anybody says my vote doesn't matter, when you get enough of those people, it ultimately means that
your vote didn't matter because your
vote didn't matter because you didn't vote.
Well, and also the thing with people have always said that for every CSM, but I mean, all these the past CSMs have had, several people from, wormholes and HiSec and all that stuff. This is the first year where it's been vastly dominated by nullsec.
No, it's certainly not the first year that it's been. It is always going to be proportionally dominated by nullsec, and as is said so many times in so many different places, I guess by me and other people, is the fact that they are organized groups. Okay, you're a member of the Green Party in the United States of America, right? You're probably not going to get a whole lot of seats, if any. You're just a small. Even if you're organized, you're small compared to the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, right? You basically kind of have the same thing here. These are organized groups out there. And even when you have groups like Pandemic Legion who say we don't have an organized ballot system, the fact is that they're running some big name candidates who do get traction out there because they have some well-known, they just have name recognition. So even though they may not have an organized ballot, they do have a large enough organization where people inside that organization know the names and outside of the organization also know the names for various reasons. So, I mean, organization is always going to play a key part. But to think that I'm not going to vote because, well, maybe what people need to do is they need to find a way of getting organized. They need to be able to organize behind a particular candidate out there that that serves their interest. But to say I'm just not going to vote is just absolutely foolish. It's foolish in the real world, and it's foolish in EVE.
I think as well that there was 22,345 votes cast this year. And from what I read today, 2,600 votes were cast by Imperium members. So it's not like the biggest null block at the time had the biggest voter turnout. So Aerith got 3,500 votes. So there was 1,000 people outside of the Imperium that decided to vote for Aerith. And it seems the same with the block candidates do just get a lot of votes from other players, even that aren't affiliated with it.
Well, just because they're not wearing the ticker does not mean the characters are not affiliated.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, because I may have 3 or 4 characters that are in the Imperium. I may have another 3 accounts that are doing something else, and the one maybe, but I still voted the same way across all of my accounts.
Yeah, and that's what they were saying on Reddit today, that the ones that followed the Imperium ballot fully was 2,600 votes total.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily characters that are that are wearing the Imperium ticker in game.
Now those are the ones that followed it fully, right? And here's this whole idea that out of the entire Imperium, 2,600 accounts, okay, voted the way that they were, okay, fine, the way that they were told, all right, or the ballot that was handed to them, right? But even at the time when you had groups like CO2 that were a part of it and people voting for the judge or the Bastion, that people within the Bastion probably bumped up Sullen Decimus higher on the list than what he was on the Imperium thing. Maybe they didn't vote for Zenuria at all. Maybe they voted for him lower down the list or something along those lines. I mean, the people that are in the Imperium, as much as everybody wants to think that it's this big hive of everybody just follows and drinks the Kool-Aid and all that kind of stuff. I know I didn't vote that list. I looked at it. I saw who on it I wanted to keep, who on it I wanted to move around. Maybe I'm a little more of an informed voter, but not everybody votes that way. So the statistics of this election, when you start getting down into some of the nitty gritty details, you really just can't pick them out and make any kind of statement regarding really anything other than I agree, 2,600 people did follow the exact pattern.
Well, really, it's the good and the bad of democracy and nothing else. And I think it's funny to hear all these complaints and innuendo stories about CCP doing this and using it for that, or the blocks doing this. This is everything that's real about real life democracy. It's all the same things. There's nothing that's different in EVE. This is just proving the whole point of EVE is real. Everything that you see in real life you get in EVE, and when they then brought in the new election system, right, then things got even more so, because this is what all the countries are debating. How can we improve democracy in the real world? And CCP is actually doing that, and they are seeing the consequences of exactly that.
And I think if we could get a quick poll from people in chat, if you could just X up in chat if you actually voted in the CSM. I know Marsha did, so Marsha can X up.
I mean, I know that this. Did you go with her to the polling place?
No, that would not be allowed.
The STV system, okay, since it was initiated, has produced more diversified results in terms of the the combination of the STV system as well as expanding it to 14 actual members has produced a much more diversified level of representation. That absolutely does not bear out this year when there is such a heavy nullsec dominated presence. When you're looking at, I think really all but 2 of them are nullsec or tied to nullsec in one way or another. And that comes down to a combination of the low voter turnout as well as the entities out there putting up just a large number of of names.
But I think blocks aside,
how many came out of the pandemic Legion family, okay, family of places out there, all right, and the names that were attached to them. I mean, these are kind of well-known, name recognition type candidates.
But if you look at what Reva just mentioned about what 30% of Eric's votes were from outside, and of course you could say that it's alts, but that wouldn't explain things like Kyle, because if you look at the ballot and what would have been expected number-wise, how many of the people that were on the null ballot would then get in, then he shouldn't have gotten in. So clearly there was a lot of mixing votes, right? There was a lot more informed voters.
Yeah, there was probably more of an external source for Kyle because he's one of the few members of the Imperium who's actually liked on Reddit.
Yeah, he is. He's very popular. And Noisy says that we're ignoring the elephant in the room, Sion. But Sion's trashing of the CSM. I don't think that the low voter turnout, seeing as there's a lot of people that at the time of voting and generally are sort of gurgoons, then Sion saying don't vote CSM is going to...
it would inspire the exact opposite.
I think aside from the Goon Swarm member or the Imperium members, like you would think that anyone antagonized with Sion would, if he said don't vote, they'd be like, well, then I'm going to vote. They do the opposite. So I don't think that had anything to do with it.
Yes, I don't think we can say Sion made people not turn out and vote.
Yeah. I think the other interesting statistic that came out is the age of the voters out there. When people talk about bitter vets apparently did not vote very heavily in this election. Either number one, they've all left. Okay, well, so did I. But the age. These are young. These are younger players. They've been around for at least the brunt of them, the higher portion. In the 2-3 year kind of range, that 1-2-3 year kind of range, which is interesting, but probably not to be completely unexpected. I mean, they haven't been around. They haven't been around as long. They don't necessarily, kind of have that disconnect with the CSM. Maybe they still have hope. All right, that a lot of veterans have lost, or that a lot of veterans have disconnected from the game. They're no longer around in the force that they once were. Who knows? But it was definitely a younger character dominated thing, which is also interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I did notice that on the results today, and it's the people who were about after the Summer of Rage are the ones that have voted most. So whether people are still, whether it's like you said that people have stopped playing from like 2005 and onwards, because there's a lot of old accounts that have gone inactive or we've rolled out. Because most of my accounts are post 2012, 2013. I only have 2 from before that. So it can be that they've made new accounts, or it could also be that they were players that joined after all the drama that everyone had in 2010 and 2011, where people started getting disenfranchised with CCP and the CSM.
Well, disenchanted, yeah. I mean, that's definitely been going on. And last year was absolutely a low point in, I think, people's feelings towards the CSM. Just because what we witnessed was not just individual CSM members, say acting badly or doing something that broke it down. We saw a breakdown in communication between the entity itself and CCP. And I think a lot of people just threw up their hands and said, "To hell with this thing." If you're not going to reform it in some way, if you're just going to continue thinking that it's going to change itself with a new slate of candidates or a new slate of representatives, I think a lot of people just say, "To hell with it."
Yeah, because now I know that the CSM last year did stuff, but as far as like in the general public's eye, I think that you didn't see a whole lot of articles on what the CSM was doing. You didn't see a whole lot of the feedback that you saw from years before. So it could be like what Dirk's saying, but also just the fact that people are like, they don't do anything. So the CSM doesn't matter. Why would I vote for a dead entity essentially at that point?
Yeah, I do think that last year was a particularly high voter turnout compared to the year before. So there was a spike in interest last year. And I think that then with the way it went during the CSM 10 caused a lot of people to just not bother with it this year. Although that takes us on to one of the next things. The demographics also came out, and USA #1, Dirk.
Well,
freedom.
For freedom.
USA.
America
USA.
votes. Yeah, those same people that voted for this CSM are definitely going to be electing Trump this year.
No.
But anyways, I would have to look back at past elections. The U.S. is always historically been the highest proportion of total voters. Right now, I don't know what it is though. Somebody brought up that it would be interesting to see on a relative basis, right? Subscriptions from the U.S. relative. I think the U.S. is actually down proportionally this year relative to their size as their size of the player base. So that would detract from that. I mean, but you would expect the United States would be the highest thing because I think that we are the highest single country by a fairly good margin.
Yeah, and last year I looked at last year's results, and last year the biggest group of players was actually other. The USA was at like 25% last year of voters, and other was nearly 50% of the votes. So this year the USA has taken that, and the other votes are down to like 13% or something. So there's been a big increase in votes from the named countries that are in there, which are the USA, the UK, Germany, Canada, Russia. Russia moved up this year in the proportion of players that were voting as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing that well, the other thing was Russia. What was Russia this year? 9% or something like that. I don't know how that's
5%. Yeah.
It was 5% this year.
Yeah, it was 5% this year.
Yeah, you're right. 5%. Yep. I don't know. I don't know what that is. I mean, there is a large Russian player base out there who I don't think gets tapped into as much. I know that there was some outreach by CCP Lilu going back a couple of years ago, to try and get them more involved. But but they are. I'm not saying that they don't vote because for reasons, but I think that they're just not as.
Yeah, well, I don't think they fielded a candidate this year.
Well, right. Yeah. There wasn't, I don't think, some mainline, well-known, UAX death type that was on there. I don't even know that there was an actual Russian on the ballot this year.
I don't think there was, because we reviewed the whole list during the voting week, and I don't recall seeing anyone from either a Russian alliance or a prominent Russian figure that I know of.
But I mean, despite the overall viewpoint, okay, that it seems like so many players have, especially vocal ones, ones that get out there and type in Twitch chat or get out there and speak and things like that, in terms of what they think about the CSM, right? We don't have to think that the CSM is a bad idea. We don't even have to think that every member of the CSM is somehow bad, because they're not. I mean, we all know of people that have been legitimately trying to do the right thing and to work hard. They run into whatever walls they think. Maybe it's partially their own expectations going in. Maybe it's just, the process of watching the sausage get made that burns them out or whatever. And then there are legitimate bad actors. There are people who go in there because they just want to be in the know, or they just want to be a name, or whatever the hell it is. But by and large, I would suggest that the people who are running have good intentions. I continue to say it over and over. It's been the last 2 years I've continued to say this. The actual structure of the CSM, the vagueness of its purpose, the way that it communicates out into the public, all of these things just end up leading to something that doesn't work. And it's why it does, in fact, need to be reformed. All that being said, the people that we just elected this year are not the people that you would want to be the ones polled for how to reform this thing.
But don't you think that the change in media climate, or the availability of all these new platforms and outlets and all the tools that we have available now will bring in a new generation, a new type of voter and a new type of candidacies?
Well, I mean, last year, we had 80 something people run for it. It was, by far the largest number of candidates. This year, I think it was 53 total candidates, not including Apothny, who dropped out. There are more than enough to pick from. The problem is, once again, this is a low information kind of election. All right. Even if you're somebody who really wants to know something about these candidates and what it is that they really think, not just what canned answers that they're giving to a podcast out there or putting on the forums or anything like that, it's very difficult to know that. Okay, it's very difficult to really get to know to get to know these people in any way that should really convince you, this is who I want to vote for. If you're even willing to take that kind of legwork, now go and try and fill out a ballot where out of 53 members, you're going to put 14 down in order.
I'm more thinking about the fact that there was a period before the CSM watch, there was a period before the TMC, right? And now we have 3 big media houses and stuff like that. Are we not heading towards something where we're going to see that more real life aspects of politics? Well, we've had a little bit of the Kingmaker Murdoch period for a few years, right? Because there's been like only one real media outlet or 2, right? So it's really been composed by those 2 entities, and then of course the blocks. But I'm just thinking that now these things are more available to more people, so we could see some very interesting changes. People that step up into the meta, they might not have the same numbers as the blocks and the big media outlets, but they can actually make a name for themselves.
They can, yeah, they can.
Crash Kitty 2017.
Crash Kitty 2017, maybe, yeah. Who knows? One of the things I think that the media does not do well out there, okay? I think that the media, I think that the people that cover the CSM, the people that interview candidates, I don't think they're ever hard enough on these people. I don't think they ask them legit, serious questions in order to prove you're not ready for this shit.
Isn't that like in the real world, right? The hard talk questions have been. That's how Crossing Seeper started out, right? With doing some of those things, giving them the really tough questions. But if candidates then choose other outlets that are more soft, then they're going to get better promotion, really, right? They're going to look better, and they're going to choose that and not take the risk of going on shows or interviewers that actually poke them really hard.
Did Dirk take the show over? No. Please, someone else talk. I don't usually talk as much on this show. It's not my big talking show usually.
No, usually you're more restrained on this show, definitely. But yeah, I can take over talking for a little bit because people, they're saying you should be quiet. So be quiet for a little bit while I talk.
Yeah, I'll be quiet.
There was also an oddity of the STV system is that we were saying that Apotheny dropped out. And one of the things was when they got the voting results, Jester's Trek and Steve Vanuken were putting up the results of what would have happened if Apotheny didn't drop out. And it would have been Erika Mizuni, who was actually on the CSM, if Apotheny had stayed on. And because he dropped out, then his votes got transferred through the STV system. And Kyle Aparthos ended up on the CSM instead of Erika, which is one of the strange things. Because, she was going to be... She almost made it through as well, even with dropping out from the STV. You can talk again now, Dirk.
I think with Erika, that's one of the topics that Dirk does not really like that much. Because there are some...
No. That right there is a good thing. I mean, I don't necessarily want to single out any candidate, but that is interesting, right? That Apotheny would Apotheny have gotten on had he been on?
Yeah, he would have done, yes.
So the difference is, at least as of that point, right, is that Apotheny would have been elected, but also Erika would have been elected.
Yeah. And then Apotheny dropped out, and then Erika ended up losing out, and then Kyle got the transferred votes.
So if anyone is risking getting kicked out of the current CSM, who's actually going to stand up to take the next seat? Anyone know?
No, they were actually discussing that on Reddit today, and Steve was going to run the numbers, but it didn't actually seem that there was any firm answers on that yet.
Well, what that is, when they have to replace someone, do they just take the next person that had the highest number of votes, or do they have like a kind of like a re-election, or do they have the current leftover CSM members decide?
Well, they take the dude who would have gotten. So if one guy drops out, they rerun all the votes that went to him as if he wasn't there.
Oh, okay, okay. That
You
just runs
filter
through
down to the
system.
next person on the voters list.
Okay.
Yeah, so Erica Mizzuni was like 50 votes short or something of getting on. The cutoff was 1,000 votes, and she got 950 something. So she would be probably next up. There was also a really voting spike. We saw this last year too. The voting was all on the few days, and then at the end, the last 2 days suddenly had a spike of over 1,000 votes again. And this might be because of the resubbing people for the war, because the World War B, or whatever we're calling it these days, started up just before the CSM voting ended. So that might be why people started voting again.
I wouldn't rule it out, but it's also that last minute thing, like you've been inundated, you're just putting it off. Oh, crap, it's almost over, better vote.
Yeah, I had a thing with that. I'd actually voted with 2 of my accounts and forgotten, and then someone reminded me there was only 2 days left, so I quickly had to grab all my other accounts and go and vote with it.
I must admit that I don't really have that much to say about the whole statistics of the CSM, because I'm very satisfied with what we got, and I'm basically just hyped to see if they can get those changes that they're talking about, and it sounds as if they are slowly getting in there.
Yeah, I mean, from the interview that Jintan did this week, and from the one on some of the Chocolate Range show, I think they had some CSM members as well. It seems like the changes that are coming in seem to be very positive, and the feedback from all the CSM members has been quite positive this year. And I even heard good things about Zenuria.
Yeah, allegedly he has been extremely active and got very good remarks from Jintan when we were interviewing him.
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise for everyone, I think.
Why? I mean, I don't think that anybody has ever said about Zenuria that he's not active in the things that he does.
Well, I think
they just question some of the things he does and says. That's all.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of people saying that, yeah, he's a joke candidate, he's not going to turn up, and there was a lot of, other people were saying that, yeah, he's going to put a lot of work into it, and he's going to actually try and do the thing that he's been elected for. And Jintan was saying that he's been, he was talking a lot about the sociology and the reasoning behind decisions and everything, which is really what he said he was going to be elected for. He would actually go in and try and do stuff to do with the processes rather than be involved.
It's a difficult ship to turn around. And I don't know. I know from having talked to Scion, and people can think what the hell they want to about Scion out there in terms of, in terms of what he is like in game. I know a lot of very good people on the CSM who thought nothing, but good things about Scion on the CSM. Scion was one of those people who was very behind somehow restructuring the CSM to be able to get more value out of it. Because he believes that there is a lot of potential value in the CSM that is lost. I think Thoric Frosthammer was another one of those people. And these are people that have backgrounds that kind of translate well to being able to discuss kind of reforming an institution like that. That being said, it is a tough ship to turn around. And I don't know why. I don't know if maybe CCP is just content with the way it is, that they're getting out of it what they think they want to get out of it. And therefore, better to just let it ride along.
Well, I think one of the things that Jintan said when he was asked about it was that on the first day in the meeting, they basically had all the major devs were in the call, and they were all introduced to them one by one, and that they were told who they could contact and when they could contact them, and they were given everyone's details. And it just seems that CCP this year are very actively involved in trying to reinvigorate the CSM so they don't have the same problems that they had last year. And I think that's a good step forward. And it seems that all the CSM members are feeling equally optimistic.
Yeah, and I think the new blood from on the developer side might actually be very contributing to a positive tone, because they might not have the same whole history and opinions about candidates and about what direction to take this whole game, right? So people like Maria Sayan and CCP Ghost, and the fact that Siegel is actually now stepping in there, and we got God and help.
Logibro.
Yeah, Logibro taking over from Lilo and Falcon. I think it's very likely that this is going to end up being exactly what the Doctor ordered.
Oh,
So-
we'll see. 2 weeks into a term, okay, 2 meetings into a term, maybe whatever it is, 3 weeks. We are in a very early stage here. We are seeing communications come out from the devs responsible for the CSM, which is good. We want to see more communication. Let's hope that continues. Let's hope it doesn't trail off and disappear at some point, right? You've got new people who are involved with being the CCP representatives to the CSM, or the leaders, or whatever you want to call them, the admins. To that, we have got a new group. We're in the honeymoon period, let's call it.
Yeah,
everybody goes in with high hopes in the beginning.
I just hope that they might actually consider the idea that Sion put out there, because there is something about the whole thing of voluntarism and a pointed contact between specific dev types and player types, because there is many groups and aspects of EVE that are underrepresented, and they will never get proportional representation in any democratic system. That means that those areas will never ever be looked on from a serious perspective by developers unless they interact with the people that use it. So I do hope that something like that happens, and I've seen a lot of positive things in the interactions in DevFleet and the interaction in Structures Slack. It looks as if when they do it, it really pays off. So I just think that they should take that and expand it even further. It may not need to take over from the CSM, but it would be really nice as a supplement.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the interaction that we've had on Structures channel, especially. We've in Slack, we've had Nullarbor in there. Sometimes really late at night, like 2, 3 in the morning, Iceland time, just answering questions and coming in with ideas and getting feedback from people. And
can we shoot Manifest for saying put it on the forums? I know that 90% of the people I talk to do not want to go to the forums at all. So keep saying that, please, CCP.
So where would you rather they went with the ideas?
Anywhere else, anywhere where there's some sort of interaction that is not at risk of being trolled and flooded to hell. So that means not Reddit either.
Which means nowhere, because wherever the primary place is that people go, okay, all of the trolls and everything else come with it, right? Whether that be Slack Fleet, Tweet Slack, or whatever the heck it's called, whether that be Reddit, whether that be wherever, it doesn't matter. It always ends up in the same thing. What's great about what CCP is, what's good and bad about what CCP is doing these days is, okay, what's good? They are communicating better. They are communicating in more places, all right? But that shotgun approach can also have drawbacks to it, meaning that something is said over here that only a portion of people are seeing. They're hearing about it second and third hand, maybe after the fact or not at all. And it's not being said in the other places that they're also frequenting. But the level of communication from developers, from community reps is better now than it ever has been in the history of the game. And people need to remember that, you know, where the CSM came from. All right, it came from, you know, kind of, and I don't mean the early kind of, you know, well, we used to have something like the CSM back in the day, kind of focusy group thing and whatnot. It came from a period of trial and tribulation in EVE.
Let me get a little bit philosophical here for a moment, because this is something that I have been talking about on the internet for quite a while, not only related to EVE. One of the things that people actually like about real communication is that once you say something, only the recipient in the room gets it. Because it is forgotten. It's in the air, right? So a live chat is very different from putting up a post on a forum. Something that goes in logs is very different from something that's said in private or in smaller groups. So you might not want to put your post up there in fear of being flamed to death, but you might not have a problem saying it in Structures or in DevFleet or in a personal chat or in a tweet. right? So I'm just saying, I would really think about moving some of the communication away from the eternal writing areas and outlets. That's my point.
The thing that's nice about the forum, though, okay, is that it's sticky. All right, if you're not around at the time that comment is made, you can still go back and be looking at things.
Yeah, I know how that part works. I was pointing out the other benefit, the fact that you do not have it sticky, that it does not have any relation to anyone else, that you don't get it linked and someone pointing it out or get war decked over it.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but there's also a lot of complaints from, it seems to be people are split into two camps. There's those that think it's really good that CCP are engaging on a variety of forums, from Reddit and Twitter to Slack and wherever else. And then there's the people that are actually quite annoyed that the devs are engaging in places that, you know, they go to the forums to find out about the games, and then they find out that the devs have posted replies to things or graphs or other information in other locations first, and they feel that that's somehow detracting from the ability of players to find information, because now they have to go to so many different places to try and find it. So there are arguments from both sides.
Absolutely. You know, and again, the fact is that CCP as an organization is communicating better today than they ever have. And that is also something that kind of takes away from the CSM, right? There are some out there who think that maybe this level of good communication is actually sidestepping the CSM. And there are some people who say that's a good thing because they hate the CSM anyways. But, you know, and then there are others who say, well, you are bypassing in a way the CSM. So does that in and of itself make it less relevant than it once was? So it's this double-edged sword. I mean, but it is what we have asked going back now, well, years, even with the CSM, better communication from CCP. Well, they're giving it to us.
And then there's also the problem that when they're on Slack, because you can actually convo a dev on Slack, then there's the problem that if they're on there, then they might just get flooded with players complaining to them or demanding things from them all the time. And then there's a problem that people feel that on Reddit, if someone posts something with a CCP tag and the Redditors don't feel that it's been quite appropriate for them to, like they've made a jokey comment or something. The best example being something like Falcon's thing with Gevlon Goblin on Reddit, where CCP, yeah, the tears over that was amazing. Where basically Falcon said something joking about Gevlon on Reddit, and because he was using his CCP tag, then people got quite angry that he should even make a comment about some player's blog that wasn't entirely nice. And so there's that aspect of it as well.
PR warriors.
EVE is a game that is surrounded by a community that can be fairly sharp-tongued at times, to put it mildly. Okay, to think that CCP devs, who we know, okay, where some of them, like a Falcon, are can be as sharp as anybody else. I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of people out there that that lay a lot of blame on that. I know a lot of people actually like it because it's not like he's only made comments like that to Gevlon Goblin. Okay, I mean he's hung other people up by their toenails for making similar kinds of remarks. There are just some people who are sharp. Maybe other people look at them and say, well, they're witty. Who knows?
And there's also the thing that much as us players really like to criticize CCP, there is also the thing that CCP are special as a gaming company in the level of access that we have to devs. There are very few gaming companies where you can be on Slack and chatting to a dev, or like now there's devs in the Twitch chat, or the CCP manifest in there at the moment. And games like the bigger MMOs, you just don't get that. And one of the comments that I hear from new players who suddenly realize this is like, yeah, it's so cool that you can actually reach out and contact devs and they will actually talk to you.
I think that stems from the history, right? That stems from the fact that they were small from the beginning, so they got extremely integrated with the player base. And eventually then when they started hiring from it and getting the volunteer system up and running and all these things, the integration got pretty crazy. Like, it became what they now call a family, right?
Yeah. And then you've got the whole thing with when you go to FanFest, it's very much more a family meeting than any sort of big like BlizzCon or anything, where it's much more detached. On at FanFest, you get to go out and you get to go out and drink with the devs, and at Amsterdam, etc. You actually get interaction one-on-one with the devs, and so players. Yeah, we have this special thing going on with the devs, and we love them really, even though we're
Man, says, to be fair, players from other games aren't as cool as you all. Hashtag brofist.
Yeah, we are super
Oh,
cool.
brofist! Boom!
There is something to be said about that, right? We always say that EVE is a niche game. We always say that we kind of have a very niche community. It is a smaller overall community than games that have millions of players playing. And that does lead to a little bit more, on occasion, personal communication that can take place, whether it be by way of Twitter, whether it be by way of these other channels, where you can send a question and there's a likelihood that if it's a reasonable question or something that they can answer, that you'll probably get a response, depending on the dev. They're not all like that. Some are more outgoing than others. They're probably in more community-oriented, places or roles.
Yeah, and there was like the Reddit thing the other day. There was a request went up for having to be able to save the ship name, and then within a day or so, that was added in the next patch. So there's not many games where you can say that, hey, we asked for a thing on day one, and then on day 3 we suddenly get the rename ship option in game.
But I mean, we've kind of diverted from the CSM topic, which is fine.
Or have we?
I just kind of want
part of it, right? Because I haven't seen any of that in any other game, right? So I think the CSM, maybe even despite all its flaws, have actually kept that integration alive.
Well, it is, and I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing, right? I don't know if it was the advent of the CSM that helped CCP realize that they needed to become better communicators, all right? And now they have, or if that was always going to happen, even in the absence of it. But what we do know is that they were not so hot at public communication, other than dev blogs and things like that, kind of 5 years ago.
Well, now that you're asking me, you kind of put me on the spot, because I kind of know the history of the CSM, and it's pretty old, right? It goes all the way back to the point where there was, 50 devs or something like that, and the engaged meta serious players were maybe only double that, right? So it was extremely easy to implement the whole CSM idea. The fact that it then trickled out and had to be put on hold and maybe not really used, and then it was tried to be introduced again in a democratic way because people said that it was special favors, the people that were on the proto CSM. So then you get the T20 incident, and then the whole thing just went crazy, right? But the idea was always the fact that CCP seemed to pay attention to the fact that the player base that they got from day one was extremely engaged and very much a brain power for the developers. So they basically just wanted to pick their brain. So they didn't have to sit there and analyze a lot of numbers and stuff, because usually the players would just know.
Yeah, and I can see there's a question in chat about what does the CSM even do? And that is a question that comes up a lot of times from players, that a lot of people aren't really sure what the hell they do. Are they armchair developers, or are they meant to be involved in taking ideas to CCP, or are they just a feedback mechanism? So what's your view on what the CSM is or should be?
Well, mine is pretty clear. It's a little bit of both armchair developer and a support mechanism for the players, because you can't always get the time that it would take to get the attention of the devs. Sometimes you have to wait 10 years for a feature to get into the game, though. So my mining frigates, they didn't come in until 10 years after I suggested it. And Torfi's promise to actually make the players the history, that didn't happen until 10 years after the first CSM. So sometimes it takes a long time.
Well, I mean, what I see the CSM as, like, what they're supposed to be is they're supposed to be the conduit to CCP, but it's basically a way to have a session where you don't have the noise of the forums. You don't have all the crap that you have to sift through to get the message that you want. And there are players that are involved, and I don't want to. Integrated isn't the word I'm thinking of, but someone informed people that can give an idea to CCP of what the general players' thoughts are going to be on certain issues without having to sift through all the forums. They can go to these 14 people and get direct answers that they can pretty much safely assume is a consensus of the general populace of the game. It doesn't always work that way, but that's what it's supposed to be.
What are those things in America? The super voters. They're kind of like that, right?
Super delegates.
Yeah, the super delegates that have like thousands of votes each. So it's something that hails back to an era when all the meta was not as evolved, all the two-way communications was not as evolved, and of course the next step would then be to introduce something like focus groups or the equivalent, so we get the two-way communication running better. Then maybe the CSM will not be that important. They would then be important as heads of these groups instead, or democratically elected voices for those groups, right?
Well, I mean, you have to remember that the CSM has evolved over time. What it began as was CSM1 is a far cry different from what it is today. There was a heavy emphasis on the idea of we as players have rights. Okay, now take that, however you want to. But again, because of things like the T20 scandal and things like that, it was an organization that was designed to represent the players to the game company. It was not into as many things as it has evolved into today. I mean, a CSM member today is hearing about things from all over the company, from some of the long-term development to marketing, to pretty much probably every division in the company. Hell, to some extent, what's going on with Valkyrie and and these other games that they're doing. In my opinion, they are overstretched. They are into things that they probably don't need to be into to be as effective as they could in representing the players. But again, they're there to represent the players. They're not there to represent their sole individual interest. They're not there to only represent the interest of the alliance that they're in. They are there to represent the players. Now, some might say, well, they're there to represent their constituents. And it's like, oh, for God's sakes, if you can tell me who the hell your constituents actually are, that might be a little bit better. Like, I represent District D in the state of, Connecticut or whatever. All right. That's really not quite how it works here. So, it would be nice if they kind of pared back what their focus was a bit, in my opinion, just so that they can actually be focused on things that matter, things where they can actually show that they were being helpful. And again, I think it's more about rounding off the edges, not so much about them being junior developers in any way. I think that is a terrible thing that some of these people go in there thinking is that they're going to somehow, bring stuff to the table because these changes must be made. Let me, alter your vision.
I'd like to point out one of the questions or comments in chat that keep coming up every single CSM, right? It's always the topic of, is there anyone representing the new players? And is there anyone representing HiSec? And it's a very difficult question as far as I can tell, because it's always a catch-22, right? Because the majority of the players in HiSec that would be interested in such a candidate are not very much engaged in all the meta and actually following these things. And it's the same problem with the new players, right? The new players that would elect a new player candidate don't know about the CSM. So you will never get a candidate that is either only HiSec focused or only new player experience focused. It's practically philosophically impossible.
Well, I would say that one of the things that Jinton mentioned again in the interview, and that's one of my views, is that there are very few players who only have experience or interest in one area of EVE. Even if you're a nullsec, part of one of the big alliances, you've probably got or have had an out up in HiSec at some point for doing things. So even if you are a nullsec candidate, you've still got interests in highsec. And this is one of the things that Jinton brought up. He said, yeah, everyone from the first 2 meetings that they've been at when they've been discussing, everyone's been interested in all areas of space, even if they live down in lowsec or nullsec or wherever. And the other thing as well that was mentioned was that people should contact the CSM members when they have ideas, or if they have a complaint that they want taken to CCP. And I think a lot of times people don't do this. They don't use them as if they're their elected representatives, which they are.
But it's a problem, right? If you take the whole thing with the null-centric stuff and the big alliance stuff, and there's always this criticism, right? That they rule the CSM. Yeah, but that's because every player that starts out has a progression, right? They will eventually end up in stuff like this. So assuming that just because you're null-centric or you live in null or you're part of a big alliance means that you do not care about highsec, you do not care about the new player experience, that's bullshit, right? It's not true. These people were also once in these situations, so they will also be interested in that type of player experience. Maybe they will be a little bit biased to the people that they are now involved with, but they will be just as interested in the overall game and getting new players into the game, so there's new blood and new members, and so I don't understand the criticism. It's a little bit frustrating, and I'm the biggest care bear around. I've not actually been in null for years, right? And I've failed at my adventures in null, so I ran straight back to highsec and did my trading and market and metagame stuff because that's what I like, that's what I'm good at, right? And so what am I? Am I a care bear only candidate? Because I actually know that there's a lot of things in null that is extremely important for highsec to operate.
Well, yeah, let me just say this. Belgian Pancake was answering Swifty out there. He said they're the Space Congress, kind of. No, they're not, because they don't have a vote. And here's the thing, right? There are 14 members of the CSM. The CSM does not vote on anything. The CSM does not need to come together on an issue. Each one of those individual representatives can speak to CCP of their own accord without the other ones, ever chiming in. Maybe they do. Maybe they get involved in the conversation. Maybe they don't for numerous reasons. Maybe they're just lazy or because it's not a conversation that they want to take part in or whatever. But you as an individual representative, it is up to you to develop the kind of ongoing dialogue with CCP, right? So it's not about they're a Congress in any way. They are a loose confederation of elected individuals who are there to, speak as themselves. It's great when maybe they can come out and stand together on an issue or something like that, to say, hey, look, we're all kind of in lockstep on this. But really, if you're somebody who has a good ability to communicate to CCP, you're probably going to get your message to them across much better than the person who can't do that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And to go back to what you were saying a little bit earlier, Dirk, one of the things I am always wary of is when you get candidates who in their thread for voting just say things like, if I'm elected, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I will make sure that this change comes in. I think that you should avoid candidates that make bold claims about what they're going to change in the game because, yeah, they're just there as a feedback mechanism. They're not there to actually implement any change.
Right.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I always saw the CSM as, right? They were a feedback mechanism. Look, guys, this is what we've got planned that we're going to do. What do you think? Okay, what do you think? Is this completely off the wall? Are there some edges that need to be rounded off before we launch this? But CCP has their vision. They have where it is that they want to go with things, and again, the CSM is there to make sure that they don't completely shit the bed on something.
And then, of course, the whole point...
Not to change the vision.
Yeah, but there's also the whole point of finding the extreme flaws that CCP developers might not actually have considered, right? There's always these extreme options or opportunities of abusing a new system that is being introduced by the developers. And it takes a very special type of brain to figure that out, whether it's the cabal in TMC or if it's Probag that sits there with his calculator. There's always holes somewhere and players will find them. And I think the CSM is supposed to help making sure that things like that might actually not get through.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I voted for Aerith this year is, as you mentioned, the pro bag thing. That should have. I don't think there's a problem with pro bag doing it, but it would have been picked up by a CSM member that knew about the market. So this is a thing that could be done. And this year I voted for Aerith because Aerith definitely knows how the markets work and how players will take advantage of them. Okay,
I don't think that we've had a legit market economy oriented CSM really since what was that 9
Minna.
when Minna was there.
Yeah.
And even there, because was Minna there for 8 and 9? I'm trying to remember, or was he 9 and 10?
I think he was only there for 1.
Yeah, I think
that's right. He was only there for 1, right? And even there, I think he kind of fell off at the end. But he was really the last one that I can recall that really had an eye towards the towards kind of the EVE economy and things. Which again, when we talk about the CSM and we talk about representation of the game, right? Here's the thing: democracy, the way that we're running it for this election, is not going to get us proper, diversified representation of all aspects of the game. No method is going to get us all aspects of the game because EVE is so broad and deep that you can just never. We would end up with 435 members of the of the CSM and turn it into a legit Congress.
That's why we need unions, right? We need the union model for the focus group. So workers of EVE unite.
Yeah. Well, there's so many special snowflake professions in EVE that, you would have to have a ridiculous number, and it would become unwieldy for the developer and all the involved parties.
No, because you would only need 1 or 2 voices for the actual interest group, right? And the rest would just be discussion groups.
Yeah, but I look when I look at the voting, and people are like, oh well, it's all nullsec, and they're the only ones voting. You quote Thomas Jefferson: "Democracy is ruled by the majority who participate."
Yep.
Allowed to participate, don't you?
Well, participate because there's no barriers other than your lazy ass.
And it's why I do think, and I've used the term districts before, but only to show that, look, there's a breakdown. And there's a breakdown of where people are coming from so that you get some sort of broader based representation, right? And I know it gets poo-pooed out there and things like that, but I don't think any of us come from democracies, and probably the people who are listening right now, most of them come from democracies. Nobody votes in one giant big cluster, one nationwide election, whether it be probably on the local level or on whatever higher what I'll call the federal level, of government, the national level. So I think, but this all comes down to really, again, what CCP wants out of it. Do they want good representation? I know that I would like to see there be more of a high sec. I'm from nullsec, and I would want there to be more of a high sec influence on there, at least a couple of seats. I would like to see wormholes be represented better and low sec be represented better, and perhaps industry represented better.
So
but the only way
you're
that
saying
we're
we should have
that,
I think you are kind of saying that instead of all this focus group and unions, we should just have a House of Lords. So we can announce that Steve Rnukin is now in the House of Lords and cannot actually be voted out.
Well, I think that does exist out there in some ways. Okay, when you start getting into focus groups where people apply to those rather than be elected to them, and then they are chosen to sit on there based on what somebody thinks are their qualifications to be on that. I think that you do get that, and that is kind of what maybe some side focus groups can do. But you've always got this CSM that kind of that sits there. And again, I think that it just would be nice to have that kind of. We should all want broader representation because you cannot make many changes in this game to one area that don't, in a derivative fashion, affect some other part of the game.
I was trying to transition to Steve because that way we might actually jump to the next topic. We're about the hour now.
Okay.
And just real quick for those that are coming in late, Matterall had something real life that he had to do tonight. Ashtarothi also had an issue tonight, so we brought on some people that we know to kind of help us staff it out this evening.
Yep. So
I'm
moving on
filler.
to moving on to our second topic for the day. One of the news stories that has been mentioned on Twitter and around the forums is that the EVEMon are looking for a new lead dev. And this brings up the problem that we always have with third-party apps. What happens when the dev leaves, especially if EVEMon, which is so widely used by players. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to get you guys to tell us about what third-party apps you do. And if people in chat can also tell us about what third-party apps they use on a regular basis in-game. So we'll start with Caleb. Do you use any third-party apps?
Not so much anymore, except I must say that I am testing out EVE Mogul more and more because that developer is very fast, and when you ask for features, it gets implemented very fast. So I used to use a lot of tools, but they get discontinued, and then everything just collapses and you have to rebuild everything from scratch yourself. So I must say that from experience, I've learned to not depend on any third-party tools at all.
Dirk?
Yeah, I mean, well, over the years, I've used, I don't know how many different either apps or websites that people have built for one reason, all the spreadsheets and all the things. But there have been two that have been with me forever in this game. One being EVEMon, and the other one being EVE Fitting Tool. These are things that I think, along with and Dotland too. These are things that have come around in this game that have benefited us. Maybe more so in the past. EVEMon, for character development, back when you had a 24-hour training queue, you wanted to make sure you had your stuff lined up right, and how you were going to efficiently train your character and be able to, just putting the skills in, at the right time and things like that. EVEMon has always been great. I think it is still relevant today, even though they've gone to the longer queue, to where you have an unlimited number of skills that you can put in there. And this is really the crux of this conversation tonight, because the developer for that is retiring and is looking to hand it off to a third, somebody else who is capable and willing to take it on.
Yep. Drayden, what third-party tools and apps do you use?
Well, I mean, everyone uses Dotland. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people use Dotland. The EVE Appraisal is another one that a lot of people use just if they want to get a quick quote on prices if they're going to sell stuff. There was a fitting tool I used to use a long time ago, but I think it stopped being supported. I never used EFT. Everyone used EFT, but I used a different one. It was kind of popular a few years ago. But there's one that I used a lot, not as much now because I don't do much manufacturing. What?
Was it Python?
No, it wasn't. But when I did a lot of manufacturing, there's one called EVE Cost. It's EVE Dash Cost. It's an amazing site. You link your API in it. You don't have to, but if you want to have everything saved all the time, and you can put in all the blueprints, you put in it takes account in your skills. You can set things like, if I want to get the materials like at purchase buy prices here, and I want to have the sell prices at sell prices here. And it works in game, and it's all linked with the in-game browser. And you can put in your blueprints, put in how many runs you want to make, and it will tell you all the materials. And if it's like a Tech 2 where you need like sub-materials, for like the Tech 2 components, you can expand those out, and it'll take into account those if you have blueprints. It will tell you all the materials that you need to build however many runs you want to do for it. And then it also takes into account, I always set it for GITA prices. It'll tell you like at GITA prices current right now from the last API pull, this is what you're going to have to spend to buy the materials. This is what you're going to make if you sell the ships wherever you want to sell. And so you can just put in all that stuff. And it's just like once you get it all set up, you just do a few clicks and it's like, boom, I need this much stuff. I'll make this much profit. So you can instantly see if it's worth building, because some certain ships like, it's worth building this right now because it makes a lot of profit. Or there's ships where like, I'm just going to break even. So it's something I used to like decide what flavor of the week I was going to do for construction. I loved it. It's actually still up, and I just checked it. They even have the Astra houses and stuff on there. So it's currently maintained and updated. So I love that thing.
And Usriel?
Let's see. I've used EVE HQ. Unfortunately, its industry features are not currently working very well. I've got a few Android apps as well, and of course I use Dotland, I use Fuzzworks. It's a pretty wide variety of third-party tools I use.
Well, just to get back to, I just wanted to mention the one that I now remember the name of. There was a really, really ambitious accounting and financial reporting tool called Emma. It was basically the big thing back in, was it 09 or 08, and it was extremely advanced. But because it was so advanced, of course, it's at a higher risk of burnout, right? So when it was discontinued, basically I had to do all the things that I had been depending on this big tool to do. So I had to almost restart everything with my accounting. And I think that's the problem with many of the tools that we see, that they grow beyond a certain point and then they can't actually be supported by one guy.
Yeah, I think that's definitely.
Started to
Yeah,
become
you
too
go.
unwieldy.
Yeah, there's definitely a problem with a lot of the things being solo guys making a small little project that then ends up being really popular. And then, I mean, one of the popular ones for industry is ISK per hour, or IPH. And the guy that ran that, Zifrian, he recently retired from EVE. And so there was a lot of panic about, who's going to take over this tool? Is someone going to remake it completely? And it was a similar situation to what EveMon is in now. And fortunately, someone at the last minute stepped in and took over. And so we've now got a new dev on IPH. And he's actually picking up the slack really well and taking over and making a lot of improvements on it.
I also would like to say that I'm actually slightly happy that many of these things are dying, because one of the major problems that they're causing is that they're giving a select elite that actually find their way to these products this whole EFT warrior perfect knowledge benefit, which is actually not good for the game and the ecology of the game. And I know that a major part of that is some rather bad design flaws from CCP's side, that it makes it possible to have this perfect setup and do these perfect calculations. But then when everyone does it, then there's no diversity. Everyone just knows that they plug everything into IPH and it's going to tell you whether something is profitable or not. It's basically like having a robot or a lot of human-controlled robots fixing everything in the game, right?
I think it's very real world. I think it's
not at all. You can't
No?
get the same sourcing in EVE as in real life, right? There's a lot of things that are not perfect in the real world, and you have the marginal cost of everything is very different in the real world than in EVE, right? Where in EVE you pay the same because everything is 100% fungible.
I think that if you can write something in the real world to make things easier, you do, and that is why these things have shown up.
Yeah, and that gives you an advantage, but the point is that these things are usually then something that becomes the next standard. That's Mrs. McGurk!
Hello, Mrs. Dirk.
Mrs. McGurk says hello.
Hello.
I guess it was your time to break the fourth wall.
Oh shit. Banned.
She just got back in. She was away for a couple of days. So.
I'm only pointing out this because there are still a few things that makes this problem very bad, and it's the same that who was it that mentioned that? Was that actually you, Drayden? With the whole looking up people's fits in kill mails, and then basically just doing everything just to counter that. It's like, well, but in real world, yes, this is a thing, but you don't have that perfect level of knowledge all the time.
Well, that's the thing. It's a guess, because it generally gives you a good idea. If you look on their thing and you look at their losses, and you see that constantly over the most recent time they're constantly running that same ship with the same fit, you can generally safely assume that that's what they're using. But if they're all over the place, it's not an exact science. I mean, they can always.
Of course not, but I'm saying that if there's this cookie cutter optimal fit, it's the whole thing with the fact that the loot tables are broken, so the meta items, everyone could just pay for the last meta level, right? And then disregard meta 3, 2, and 1, because that's not worth it, and the loot tables are broken, so there's plenty of meta 4, so there's no price benefit at all. And then how did they solve this? Well, they solved it by first nerfing the mineral content, and then they solved it by just leaving it there, and then now we got Tiericide. So there's this whole flaw in the philosophy.
I do agree with some of the complaints about tools giving you extra information. For example, some of the market tools, and if you can write your own things, then you can pull all the market data for all the regions into one sheet, and you can instantly have the prices, whereas players who can't use these scripts, etc., don't have that advantage. And I know Pirate's Little Helper, a lot of people get quite angry at that.
But the thing with that, though, the only way to get rid of that would be to completely just eliminate the API altogether. And they're never going to do that. Most people wouldn't want that. And actually, a lot of these people are complaining about the fittings. You can look up kill boards and see the fits and stuff. I bet they use a lot of tools that use API. And so if you get rid of API, now all of a sudden they're going to start complaining that they can't use the tools they're usually using. So you just got to suck it up and deal with it.
I just have a problem with the whole unique item or rarity of things that are then not rare at all because the loot tables are so gameable, right? So there's never going to be a lack of supply of something because you can just go out there and farm it to pieces because there's no proper code AI-wise to handle the loot tables and to make sure that the diminishing return equations actually work. I think until we start seeing that, we will keep having these problems.
But yeah, I think especially like Pirate's Little Helper, which people get quite annoyed by, that's just copy pasting the local channel into the website, and then it just scrapes the kill boards to get information. So it's not actually you using anything. It's just a result of how the kill boards work.
I think
I don't think we're ever going to see API information going away. I don't
No.
think we're going to see third-party tools going away. And these third-party tools, some of them especially, have been very helpful to the player base over the years, just in terms of getting some of the mundane things out of the way.
I think my
Again,
point was that
I don't think anybody's going to cry about
you
that.
don't have to remove these things. You just have to go back a little bit to making sure that the design and the changes to fittings make it possible to not have a cookie cutter fit.
Well, and
Well, I think you still eventually get to cookie cutter fits regardless, because there's plenty of EFT warriors out there that never bothered EFTing. All they did was go and check out somebody else's fit that they had come up with. Now maybe they did the legitimate EFT warrioring, but once it was proven to work, everybody copies it.
the only thing that I've ever seen come out that used the API that I actually really didn't like was it was a long time ago, EVE Skunk, when they first came out, because back before EVE Skunk, everyone used to send their ops through in-game mails, like alliance mails or corporation mails. You'd set up your ops, you'd tell people the fits, you'd set everything there. When EVE Skunk came out, now it's because they somehow gathered all these APIs with people's mails. Now every mail you sent out was leaked online, and so that's all of a sudden forced people to started using Jabber, started using other forum-based stuff. So it's like, I didn't like it because I tend to love doing everything in game. I hate having to go check the forums. Like, man, I fucking hate, Family Show. I hate forums. I don't want to log into forums and go check stuff out. I just want to check, send me a mail. I'll find out the time. But you couldn't do that anymore, because then, I mean, the enemy, if they had spies, they'd know where you're going. But it allowed everyone else in EVE to show up as well because they knew it was happening.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people are concerned about with some of the API stuff. And then you get sites like EVE which really annoy some people. I mean, before that, you used to have to actually go and find out whose people's outs were and do and do an educated guess on who was in a corp or try and get them to log on. And now you just need to go to EVE and you've got the entire corp join and leave history. And a lot of people feel that's going too far as well. And Dirk's gone all quiet since his wife.
She's gone. No, I was just trying to let some people get a word in edgewise. I guess
he's grumbling. She didn't bring him Chipotle.
Trying to catch up on the chat over here. I mean, yeah, look, these things, they can be a huge resource. They can be a huge intel tool. When CCP converted to the API crest data and put even more information in the hands of the players found a way of using that, and that's just going to happen. But as somebody said earlier, once the playing field is leveled, because of the transparency of information out there, it comes down to skill in other ways.
I think, yeah, all the benefits of the API is far outweighs any negatives with it. So I mean,
I can
anyone that
EFT
wants-
warrior all day,
Yeah.
okay? And I can tell you right now, I can have the absolute best ship fit possible. Hell, I can run officer modules on there, okay? And I will get stomped by 90% of the people that are in the Twitch chat right now. Because I'm just bad.
I'm good at pushing F1, anchoring. I could do that all day.
But yeah, there's a lot of people as well who are generally nervous about giving out their API. There's a lot of misunderstanding among players, I think, about what your API exposes you to. And yeah, people will refuse to join Corps just because they want the API. And in extreme cases, players think that if you give someone the API, they're going to log into your account and steal all your stuff. And so I think maybe as the API is so important, or is becoming more important now, then CCP should perhaps help players understand a bit better what it is that it does and what it doesn't do, so that they know that Corps aren't stealing all your stuff.
Exactly the same with the SSO, right?
Yeah, the first time I heard about API, I actually thought that as well. It's like, I was like, I'll go make one. I was a brand new player, and then it showed the things like, what do you want people to be able to see? Like character information. I was like, I mixed that up with login information. I was like, no, this seems, who would do this? But and you eventually get used to it. But after a while, everyone's information is just out there all the time. I don't care. I'll throw my API into anything. I won't put like a full API into anything, but I mean, most things that want your API just want character sheet and a few other things. I don't care if people see how much money I got in my wallet.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that comes up, especially with traders. They're like, if I give someone my API, then they'll come and steal all my trade stuff, my trade secrets. And to be honest, unless you're one of a very small number of people in the game who are doing something spectacular with trade, then the huge alliances aren't really interested in what you're trading between the hubs or what you're flipping in JITA. It's just not of interest to them. Unless you're like Entity or, one of these big players who's got loads of stuff everywhere.
But yeah, I mean, from a new player's perspective, when they're asked, I need your full API or whatever it is, if they're joining up someplace out there, I'm sure it can be kind of scary because you do feel like you're giving up some information and you're just not. I mean, you remember, trust nobody in EVE, right? But here I am giving up all of the information that is behind my character and account and things like that to this person on the other end of a chat because I'm because I'm looking to join their corp, let's say. It probably can be scary, and it probably does need to be explained to them better exactly what the API is capable of doing. But it's not control your account. It's just know things about your characters and account.
Yeah, and there's also the thing that when you're in the big alliances, you have so much information coming in from so many APIs that you're not going to sit there and trawl through every individual's API just to find out where it is they're making their risk. You don't really care about that.
Maybe it is wrong. Some of the levels of information that is available out there. Maybe it is wrong that an out of game system is capable of detecting when one of your pauses gets attacked. Maybe you should have to be in the game, or somebody should have to be in the game to get that alert coming out. I don't know. Other people would sit there and say, well, you know what? We can't be around 24 hours a day, and God knows when something's going to happen. And
well, it's either more automation or perfect knowledge, right? You have to have one or the other. Otherwise, the game would grind to a halt because, as you said, people can't always be there. So how do you then resolve that? And that's really a balance issue and a design issue to figure out what can we allow to be automated and be AFK. And I just think that currently, I think that balance is off.
Maybe.
Yeah,
well, just to take the example of the market, right? You have perfect universal information of contracts, but not of the SCC market. That's an upside down design. That makes no sense. It should be the other way around. You would have fog of war on local contracts, and you would have perfect knowledge of markets.
Yeah, I think that's. I know that's one of your particular bugbears and something that we've had.
Yeah, but it's because it makes no sense, right? It is upside down if you compare to the real world, right? I can look at the Japanese stock exchange or the British stock exchange or the American stock exchange. At all times, there's no hindrance for that. I can even trade with it, but I can't see what people are trading in the back alley or what they're deciding in closed rooms. So it should be the other way around. It makes no sense.
And I think you've touched on one of the things that I wanted to actually discuss, which was about something that Dirk mentioned on Twitter today, when Dirk was talking about the EVEMon having the lead.
The food conversation about what to eat in the morning after you're hungover, about bacon.
Yes, that one, and then the one about should CCP take over things like EVEMon.
Yeah. I think that you see elements of certain third-party apps that are making their way into the game, right? They have expanded the ship fitting tool type stuff, within the game. There's some other things that have come through because of ideas, I think, that probably sprang up through third-party apps. But CCP has been extremely lucky, I'll just use lucky to have such a robust third-party app developer type community out there who makes so many of these things. I cannot imagine EVE Online without a lot of those tools out there.
I think you're perfectly right, and I think what should happen is that there should be some sort of inheritance system at play that CCP helps develop. So basically they would go in, take over when someone is burned out or not able to support something, take it into some sort of internal system and discuss it with, say, DevFleet. Who wants to pick this up? Who wants to help update it? This is what we can do with our time, and this is what we need you guys to do.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, and you do see it in other games too. I'm going to upset all the chat now, saying that yeah, I've played WoW for a very long time, and in vanilla WoW there were the mailboxes were crap and your bag was crap, so you had to have all these third-party tools, and then over time they've started adding these tools into the game. So now you have a lot of the functionality from the early games and from the early third-party tools, and the same with the. Yeah, in WoW, it's the boss fights and everything that they've added certain features, and CCP could probably go the same way with adding features in from third-party tools over time.
I think that there's almost this feeling, and I don't know this, but I think that there's almost this feeling on CCP's behalf that they tiptoe lightly around adding some things to EVE that may step on the toe of a well-used third-party app. I'm quite certain that they could probably build the functionality of EVE fitting tool or PIFA or whatever, right? Something that's robust like that straight into the client. But they know that either A, they'd be stealing it from somebody else who's created out there, have to buy it from them, or feel as though probably they should offer some sort of compensation to them, or be seen as they stole it.
Yeah, but it's not stealing if they're taking over something that's been discontinued, right? Then it would be fair. Game, right? Then
it wouldn't be stealing even if somebody said, "Here, if you would like to take this over and like actually put it into the game, and give it to them." I don't know exactly how it works, but yeah, I mean, if EVEMon were to die because the gentleman that is the developer of it now doesn't get somebody else to pick it up and carry it on, that would be a loss to the community. But maybe that's just on us as the community.
The alternative is to start discussing something like proper licensing to players, right? Because now we have these problems with players actually trying to sell these projects to each other. So I think something has to go in and resolve these issues. I don't remember which one of them it was, but there was a little bit of discussion about the whole thing about immaterial property rights and RMT and stuff.
But I will liken it to this. Okay, EVE Vegas used to be a player-run event. Okay, it was set up by a guy named Zappawork, a goon, and it started off as this player-run event that eventually took on some, and then CCP took it over. Didn't demand to take it over, but just as it worked out, they are now the ones who fully own and run EVE Vegas. I think that there's probably some opportunities for that they should probably explore for some of these third-party applications, just in order to make EVE the game better.
Well, and the thing where you're saying you didn't think they don't want to step on people's toes, it might also just be the fact that they don't want to spend the development resources and time and money developing something that's already exists, that someone has already made. It may be outside a game, but it why redesign something that's already there when you can put that money towards designing new features in the game that don't exist?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that the problem then becomes if it's something like EVEMON. I'm sure EVEMON will find a new lead dev, but if EVEMON can't find a lead dev, then should CCP maybe step in if it's they take it over or EVEMON dies?
They may feel that what they've done, already in terms of allowing you to put in all these skills, and you're not going to get some of the functionality, but you can go in and you can put in this giant wall of skills, right? And order them, in the order that you want them to be, and things like that, which is a far cry different from what the skill queue used to be like. But yeah, it would be nice if some of these things, I think, were actually built into the game. But again, they've been lucky, and I say lucky because I think they are lucky to have the kind of third-party development crew that is out there building these things. But then again, you look at the player base of EVE and some of the ingenious people that play this game and get into building these kinds of things. I don't know.
There are plenty of players who've actually started learning coding and even ended up now having real life jobs in coding just because they started playing EVE and they wanted to write their own spreadsheets or they wanted to write their own graphing tools or whatever. So yeah, there is definitely a special group of players that plays EVE that's really good at using the code for things. As well, CCP give us a lot more tools than most other games give their players to build things with.
But they seem to still keep a lock and key on some that might actually create even more creativity, right?
Such as?
Well, some of the tools for visual aids and graphic stuff and the models and stuff, that's only been slipping out, right, recently. It used to be very difficult to get that data out.
Oh, you mean like Tiamba's stuff?
Yeah, and things like the graphics and stuff that you would have to sit there and scrape out of the client, and eventually they gave in. But the next step, if we are looking at other brands than just EVE Online, the next step is going to be things like mods, right? The Unreal Engine that's being used across CCP now has so many mod people out there that would be able to do fantastic things. And if you notice that many of the creative things players in EVE has had to use weird hacks, and here I am of course referring to Clear Skies, the fact that you didn't have any alternative, you couldn't get a proper EVE feel in that whole creative process, right?
Yep, and Marsh is bringing up a good point in chat. A lot of the crest changes and that have been happening recently that players have really liked have been done well. Fox 4 has been largely in charge of crest, and he's leaving at the end of June, I believe. So there is concern about whether his work that he's started is going to continue with crest, because he's also been so involved with the community, whether it's on IRC or now on Slack. Then yeah, there's a lot of concern that maybe the way that it's been run recently won't continue.
I would be shocked if somehow or another that fell to the wayside. I'm going to use one of those words, hope. I'm going to hope that they have somebody coming in behind who has been working on this, but just hasn't been the front man the way that Fox 4 has, to handle this stuff. But I would be shocked if there's not somebody there who's going to pick up the ball, because this has been an immense amount of work over the last couple of years that it would just be surprising.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well that one of the other things with programs like EVEMON, and that is that they aren't losing their relevance, but they are a little bit. I mean, EVEMON was used a lot by EVE Central for uploading the data from the markets. You would run the cache uploader, and then it would upload to the markets, and that functionality is no longer there because of crest. And then you had the skill plan, as you said, it used to be a 24-hour queue, and now it's a massive queue that you can put in. So there's less need for storing your skill plan in
except
like,
for if you want to be efficient in how you train, right? You know, what you want your characteristics to be set up like in order to train efficiently. That is really what it is good at. Yeah, that's really what it is good at today.
It's also
I mean,
good if Dirk has your API, because he can let you know if your skill queue is stopped or going.
is that one of your skill sets, Dirk? Checking up on people's skill queues?
No,
I gave him an API. He's like, Drayton, are you training right now? I should be. Says it's paused. Oh shit, yeah. I jump clone, forgot to start it up again.
that was back in the day before you know, the longer skill queue and everything. Although since this longer skill queue came out, there were a couple times I caught you. I'm like, dude, how do you not have a year-long skill queue in there?
I have to admit, I'm terrible at that. I have a skill queue running and then I'll stop it for whatever reason, and I'll just forget to restart it for 3 months or something. So I'm absolutely terrible at skill queues. And I think like with EVEMON, I think it's always said that it's a new player thing, but I think a lot of people who use it now are older players min-maxing their remaps and their implants. And I speak to a lot of new players now, and they don't use EVEMON. They're not aware of it at all. So I don't know whether it's just us old bit of vets that use it.
No, I think I think it's about that awareness thing. I think it's about understanding that there are these tools out there. It's you know, the other day up on the launcher, there was the tip of the day, and it pointed people to TotalEVE.com. Okay, TotalEVE.com is something that Wiggles and I put together because I just wanted something simple. I do these shows. I get information out there from all various places. I wanted to stop, you know, going to a bunch of different bookmarks, and I wanted there to be a desktop where I could, you know, just look at a whole bunch of places all at one time. The Drudge Report of EVE, in a way. All right. I think that things like that, and you know, and you'll see down on kind of like if you're looking at it on a desktop, down on the bottom, you know, there's this useful information area where there's links to these things like Fuzzworks and EVEMON and Dotland, and you know, hell, other things like the Angel Project and things like that, right? You know, things where it, you know, it kind of is good for people to know, but also all the blogs and things. Communicating it out there to players, especially new players who don't know that these things exist, that don't know that the various tools exist. You talk about the new player experience, get them involved in understanding what information is out there, I think is a critical thing for helping to retain players. They can go and change the in-game new player experience all they'd like, and that will be helpful, no doubt. But I think communicating to new players that there are helpful tools out there for them is something that we don't do very well.
Yeah, we need the equivalent to what is that thing called that installs all your mods and stuff for World of Warcraft and all the other games. What's it called?
Curse.
Yeah, something like the Curse client, but maybe even more EVE-esque, right? We need something business to business like. Right, that also involves the social aspects and the player-run websites and services and all these things. So we really need to maybe get CCP to consider revisiting the EVEGate thing, because it didn't really take off, but it could have.
EVEGate being the Spacebook thing.
Yeah, the Spacebook. But the point is that it never really took off. It never really got to a point where it was used, and I think that's because it was poorly implemented, not because the features or the ideas were bad.
See, I think veterans probably gain less out of EVEMON, especially today since they made changes to the skill queue and everything. Gain less out of it than new players do, because they're not shifting skills as much. They're you know right now I'm sitting, I don't know, 150 million. I don't use EVEMON the way that I used to. Nowhere's near the way that I used to. I mean, I used to live in, you know, EVEMON was, you know, was one of those things that was just up all the time. Again, it was a different time in terms of the skill queue. But I would map out a year. I would say I want to train as efficiently as possible, because there's one thing in EVE. You can get ISK back, you can get, you know, ships back, whatever. What you cannot get back in EVE is time. Although now with skill injectors, even that's kind of quirky in terms of skill time. But
yeah, it is. I think it is a much more useful for new characters. And as you said, you know, you don't use it much anymore. I have it for when I'm remapping, if I bother to remap these days. But when I was a younger player, I used to check every year for what my best remap was, and I try and have a year-long skill plan. And now I have no idea. I've probably got a charisma remap in for the last 4 years, and I haven't really cared that much about it. I'm not bad at EVE, honestly.
I think that it is something that we can absolutely, well, when I say we, there's two sides to this, right? There are the people who are out there communicating things, whether they be podcasts, whether they be the written, the written medium, any of shows like this or whatever, where we can absolutely communicate with new players. But even there, right? Getting new players to find out about the fact that there are podcasts, that the Mittani.com or EVE News 24 or Crossing Zebras or the myriad of bloggers exists is difficult.
So you're saying that what we want next is that those video services that are now available in the client should open up for things like Twitch?
No, I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna go that far. I mean, but I think that there's probably a way that without breaking the immersion of people out there, that CCP can find a way, especially with new players, to communicate. Hey guys, guess what? There's tools out there, and there's people talking about EVE, and you might actually learn something, even if Dirk is drunk.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, because we take it for granted, all these tools that we're so used to using every day. So yeah, we forget about them. And when we're talking to new players, we forget that they don't know these tools. So you might assume that they've got their skill plan chucked into EveMon, or that they've been to Zkill, or that they've been looking at the podcast. And then when you tell them, so how long does it say on your EveMon skill plan? They just have no clue what you're talking about. And then you've got to walk them through all this, setting it up. So I think that there could definitely be more important, there could be more importance put on third-party tools in the new player experience. And I think, as Marsha's saying, that the new player, the new player rookie help channel is somewhere that a lot of information is given out, and a lot of it is, I spend a lot of time in there because I'm often just bored stations sitting. So I make a trial account, and then I just go and hang out in rookie chat for 8 hours and help out all the new bros. And it seems to be a lot of the time it's just get EveMon, remap for this, do this, and then people get into it. But yeah, they don't know that it's there in the first place.
Oh, and while we are slightly still on the crest and reading and writing from EVE, I would like to point out one thing that I still find extremely offensive. There's all these things that you can know about the game, but being able to access even channels you own from outside and writing into them is not possible. I think that is ridiculous, and it should have been a thing long ago, so we're not forced into comms.
So you're saying that you should be able to write in corp chat from out of game?
Yeah, if you have the appropriate credentials, you should be able to do a crest call and a crest write to change things like the MOTD, change things like your calendar and things like that. They should all be part of that aspect. And I wouldn't say that you should be able to read all chats or write into all chats, just the ones you own.
Oh god, G to local. If we could all log into G to local and spam.
Yeah, that wouldn't be possible if it's only the owner that can do it, right?
I don't know. There's something to be said, in my opinion, about you want to affect something in game, you need to log the hell in and do it.
Yeah. Well, and also, God, if you were able to log into various corporate alliance chats when you weren't in game, then all of a sudden you're gonna start seeing these corps and alliances that require you, we know you have a phone.
No,
so
you're not listening. You wouldn't be able to.
I would be like, the hell no. If I'm not at home on the game,
you're not listening. That's not possible with what I suggested. I said you have to be the owner to read and write.
Oh,
right.
I thought you meant just everyone.
So I
access.
can relay it into another format, right? Basically, like what Cripper was doing with live EVE, right? Where he was basically putting bots in that was then reading the chat and relaying it out of game. Because that's something that might be very useful, especially to people that would like to be able to follow while they're not able to log in.
I'm not going to lie, a lot of what I did with EVE Live was I sat and read G to chat while I was out of game, which is probably the worst use of it ever. But yeah, I think maybe reading... I don't know if I agree with. I think I agree with Dirk that you shouldn't be able to access in-game content while you're out of game. People should have to log in.
Well,
And
and, you know, and you know, here we're just talking about chat channels, but you know, there's obviously a lot of in-game stuff that people can access from out of game. Again, I go back to things like, you know, a pause being attacked or whatever. But
so it's okay
you know,
that I know that. I can know what's happening to my bosses. Okay. I can know what's happening in every single market in the game, but I can't even see what's happening in my own owned chat. That makes no sense.
I'm not saying that that's okay. You know, I'm not saying that that's okay. You know, there is the question, and chat channels would not be some big killer of the game by any means. Although I do think that, you know, for a lot of these things, you should actually have to be logged in. But yeah, Marsha brings up, she brings up the point. You know, Tweet Fleet Slack is showing how popular out of game chat is, though, and you know what? That's absolutely correct. The problem with some of these things, and it's why I do think that CCP does need to maybe focus, you know, a bit more on the forum aspect of things, is to post there, you actually have to have an account in EVE Online, as opposed to a lot of these other places where you get a lot of old, bitter people who don't even play the game anymore, but they like hanging out, socializing, and you know, either doing it the right way or tossing grenades. You get them both.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point about Slack, but you don't need to have an active account for Slack. If I remember, there's definitely people in Slack who aren't subbed to EVE at the moment.
Right.
But for places like, say, Reddit, then there is definitely a problem with people who aren't subscribed to EVE and have no interest in EVE, just going there to, as you said, throw grenades.
Well, you just, you know, again, everybody has an opinion. EVE is a very vocal community. Although, even though the people who do, you know, even if you took all the people who are associated with, you know, posting on Reddit or posting here or posting on the forums or posting in Slack or you know, wherever, you know, even in the chat channel today, right? Even if you took all of those people, it's still a distinct minority of the overall game.
Yeah, I think there is definitely EVE is one of those special games where quite a lot of people spend more time out of game actually playing EVE than they are logged in and mining and ratting. You know, the out of game stuff in EVE is one of the big draws for people.
You see that all the time on the comments to when there's like a real world media story about EVE, or, you know, or even just a gaming media story about EVE, right? The number of people who are down there posting, man, I love reading about this game, but I don't know, I don't want to play it, or I was told not to play it, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of sad. I mean, EVE is an interesting game to talk about. I know that I could not go do a podcast or, you know, anything like that about one of these other games out there. It doesn't feel like it has the same sort of, I don't know, consequence in a way.
Because it doesn't.
Well, because it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do a show about the meta of the Division. No, that would be a very short show.
It's like, do you have an SMG? Yes. Do you have a marksman rifle? Good. Show over.
Yeah, EVE is very special. That it's one of the things where we spend, in a lot of cases, more time outside of game doing stuff than we do actually active in the client. I mean, I know I deliberately have an EVE game play style that means that I don't actually have to do much in game. I do station trading, so most of my, you know, I can be AFK and logged in for hours and nothing bad happens. You can't do it with PvP, for example, but definitely there are aspects of the game where you can actually do more stuff out of game than in game.
I'm gonna just call on the D&D geeks out there. I think they will agree with me that EVE has a lot in common with a game session in D&D, where you were sitting down, you prepped everything, you made your characters, you were ready to play, you got to the first few steps of the storyline, and then you ended up talking about everything else, about parties and girls and whatnot, and totally forgot to play. So it was almost always like 75% chit chat and socializing and 25% gameplay. And I think EVE has a lot of that. So in that, I think it succeeded to do exactly what I wanted in a game.
And yeah, I'd actually like to bounce this to Urzio. You're on a podcast on that. How much time do you actually spend on out-of-game stuff versus active in-game time?
Well, now that the podcast isn't active anymore, a lot less. But, I mean, it was a minimum commitment of at least 3 hours for an episode, you know, looking at the news of the day, of course, about 2 hours, 2.5 hours for the show itself, and then post-production.
And
so it can add up.
And Dirk, how much time do you spend active in EVE versus out of game stuff?
Well, at the moment, probably more out of game stuff related to EVE. But but I gotta tell you, back last year, Wiggles and I had put together the New Eden update, where we were doing this 15-minute kind of news of the day and sort of a recap of the news that people were writing about or talking about. And I found that broke me, because for a 15-minute broadcast, it took me about an hour to record it and fix it, right? But there was probably another 3 hours of scanning what was going on out there just to give a 15-minute report on the headline. So I had to put that down, because it was just becoming way too time consuming. But I'm getting back to playing more EVE. Well, I was certainly getting back to playing more EVE with the war, but then the war kind of didn't go the direction that my team would have favored, and now things are a little bit different than what they were. And I don't know. I'm kind of looking around for really what it is I want to do with EVE, because I've been playing this game since 2008, right? And there are things out there that even since then I've never done, and that I want to. But one of the big things is, you sometimes get caught in an anchor of the social circle that you're in. And it's hard to leave the people that you're with to maybe go do something new and different in the game that might intrigue you more about the game. EVE is so big, it is so vast. I wish I was, and that has been something that I've been fighting with for the better part of probably 6 months at this point, is what do I want to do? Well, I don't want to leave these guys that I talk to all the time. I still have that common bond with these people here, and is that worth more to me than, I don't know, going and figuring out what, I don't know, low-sec roaming in a Kestrel is.
But then with, as we were saying about the out-of-game communications like Jabber and Mumble and Slack, would you not still be in contact with those guys, even if you're logged on a faction warfare out?
Yeah, I mean, yes. You would still be in contact, right? But then, you would begin to lose some of those connections to kind of what's going on, and it's just, it's just been it's been a difficult choice, because again, EVE is a very social game. It is one of those things where without the social aspects to it, I think it fails on a great number of levels. But it also kind of keeps you sometimes pigeonholed, to where you have to ask yourself, well, what is it you really want to do? Is what you're doing here the thing that you really want to keep doing? So, I mean, that's something I am struggling with figuring out in order to be able to put more hours into the actual game itself.
And I'm just going to rescue CCP Manifest from Caleb in the chat and ask Caleb, how much time do you spend in game versus out of game stuff, Caleb?
I don't think I am. I'm at 90% out of game. I think 10% is a good day. I lose so much money making on people commenting and things I have to read, and yeah. So I can't remember when I was last focused more than half an hour in game.
How about you, Drayden?
Oh, definitely way more out of game. I almost what Dirk was saying. I've gotten. I used to be really into the going out on fleets, getting in fights all the time, and now I've kind of transitioned into this. Maybe it might just be because of the Imperium's just using a bunch of interceptors now, and that's just I like bigger stuff. You start throwing battleship fleets out there all the time, count me in. But I definitely just. Most of my stuff is done out of game, as far as like talking to people, doing shows like this, stuff like that. As far as in game, I used to do like some moon farming and stuff, but now space is gone, can't do that. So now I find myself logging in very rarely now.
I mean, I'm kind of strange. I do actually play EVE. I'm actually logged into EVE at the moment. But what I do in EVE is that, I station trade. So I actually spend most of my time just sitting in channels chatting to people. And Marsha said, the problem, she said in chat that the problem she's been having is the social groups. So my social groups in EVE are the chat channels I'm in. I'm not in a proper alliance. I'm not in a proper corp. I just have the in-game chat channels. So I don't have the problem with that. If I go and do something different, I'm going to lose this group of people. The channels are still there.
I really hate the type of comment that we're kind of getting now with the, so these people don't play EVE. Well, the point is that we really do, right? We might not be doing the nuts and bolts down in space, but someone needs to take care of handling all the accounting for your ship replacement programs. Someone has to actually handle all the recruitment. Someone has to handle all the things that you can't do when you're shooting rocks or ships.
That is one of the things, because there's a lot of people out there that say the Mittani doesn't play EVE because he doesn't really log in. Okay, I do see him log in. I have no idea what he's doing, if he's going to his office in the Serenin corporate headquarters or something, the corporate tower. But there are so many different things that can be done in EVE. Some of them, a lot of them even, don't require you to be in a spaceship doing something. Now, other people, they think that if you're not in a Hulk mining an asteroid, if you're not in a ship out there, blowing somebody up on a gate or leading a fleet or whatever the heck it is, that you're not playing EVE. But EVE has developed a whole bunch of different roles. I know I play enough to stay connected and to do what it is I have to do on my multiple accounts. I just don't play it the way that I did in 2010 when I was just sitting in a belt all day mining.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I do trade in industry, and I would say that 80% of what I need to do in game is actually set up out of game. It's checking out what I'm going to build, running the prices. The actual active in-game time for it is very minimum. So I think as you find your niche in EVE, you generally you don't have to be as active as you are initially. When you're a new bro, you're out everywhere all the time doing stuff. And as you get older, that's not the same.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you get into things like, being a corp, if you get into being a corp CEO, if you get into alliance management, if you get into being one of the administrators, like you said, Caleb, of SRP and things like that. All of a sudden, that management role, you don't necessarily need to be in a spaceship. You don't necessarily need to be logged in. And the sad part about it is, and I'll be honest here, because I think it's one of the things that probably killed me as far as being in a spaceship, is I spent too much time doing that. I became ingrained with handling functionary type roles. And that probably took away some of the overall enjoyment, because that is soul sucking at times. It is absolutely soul sucking.
I was just triggered by the comment, and it relates to things like in other games when some of these weird creative people that spend millions of hours decorating their houses or playing Space Barbie, and sure, that's maybe not what you call playing the game, but to me, it seems amazing that someone spends that much time on something so niche, and it ends up being an added content to the game. It adds so much flavor, and it's something that other people get awestruck about, right? So the guy that, I forgot his name. The guy that made Clear Skies, did he play EVE? He made like 3 episodes, full episode series, right?
Yep, he played EVE.
About EVE. How much time did that take? Is that not playing EVE when he's doing that?
Yeah, I mean, you can't render all that stuff in Source SDK and have it, be quick. I mean, really. Because that's how he did all those interiors and the scenes with, the actual
I'm pretty sure he outsourced a lot of that, as far as I remember.
But yeah, I mean, as Marsha said as well, the middle management roles in EVE, they kill your playtime and the amount of fun that you have in EVE. I spent a lot of time doing our Tech 2 production for our Corp and Alliance. And it got to the point where I was just spending so much time figuring out what was meant to be in what hangar and what time, and who'd put something in the wrong damn can again, and lost half our materials that, yeah, it ends up burning you out once you're doing the middle management roles. And so I just started throwing around frigates in low sec just to take out the stress of having to deal with all the production stuff.
Yeah, and I guess it's probably a good time to sit there and say, to some extent, thank those people who are, taking on the tedium of those roles. Now, maybe some of them, have some power trip or whatever, and that's why they want to be the leader of your alliance or the leader of the, of a corporation or whatever. But FCs who are out there directing content for all of the people that are underneath them, alliance leaders and corporation leaders and the middle management types that, that flow through EVE, whether you are in HiSec or whether you are in NullSec or Wormholes or anywhere else. These people are taking on roles that aren't necessarily the most enjoyable things in the world, even if they are pretending to be space politicians or, corporate leaders.
Yeah, I think it's, as Marsh is saying, the logistics people in alliances, that's some of the most, well, it's not tedious if you like doing it, but it is tedious work, just running backwards and forwards, fueling towers, fueling posses, etc. That, yeah, people burn out in these roles fast, and then they wonder why they can't get people to do it. And yeah, Marsha's right that they don't get enough credit.
But anyways, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes here before we've got to wrap this up. So I don't know if we want to go into final comments of some sort or what.
Yep, we'll start with you, Doug.
Well, start with somebody else. I've actually got to check something.
Okay, I'll start with Drayden then.
Sorry, I was typing. I miss it.
These people are paying attention, really.
No, I've been listening, but I just had to type something real quick. What was the question?
The question was, do you have any final comments?
Final comments? No, I'm stoked about that site. I haven't been there in a while. I was posting to some people. I'm glad other people are interested in it. Other than that, no.
Caleb?
I'm just gonna end with saying that the direction that I'm seeing from CCP is so different and so much more interesting to me that I am an endless optimist right now. So I'm looking forward to the next many years, I hope, and following what they're rolling out, because it looks crazy.
Israel?
Yeah. It's kind of funny listening to people say, "Oh, you don't play EVE." It's like, I have 9 accounts, and I log into all of them. Most of the characters just sit in a certain station and build stuff, but the other one gets out and has killed his fair share of pandemic horde. So it's not always, it's EVE is in the eye of the beholder, basically.
Yep. And Doug?
Yeah, I don't really have anything more to add. I mean, I think I've used up my word allotment for the night. But what I do want to say is that coming up after the show will be Drunk Canadian, who will be debuting Doom, the new Doom.
No, he streamed it last night.
He just told me he's dooming it.
Oh, he's dooming it, but he played Doom last night, so it's not.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry, it's not a debut.
It's a continuation.
Yeah, I just want to. I personally want to thank Caleb and Rive, coming here tonight to kind of take over the button pushing. For as all of you know, I do not push buttons. I just show up at these places and hopefully add a little bit of value. Also, Urs, thanks for coming by.
No problem.
Yep. And I'd just like to finish up by saying, thanks everyone for putting up with us tonight. I know it's been not as organized as when Matterall does it, but and thanks to Israel for coming in at very short notice to help us out. And I agree with what everyone said tonight, that it's been a lot of fun, and I really hope that we haven't been too bad for you tonight.
Terrible. We're awful. It's terrible in stations.
And it was very nice seeing Mrs. McGurk show up.
Yes, Mrs. McGurk says hello to everybody. So
the EVE celebrity that doesn't play EVE.
Exactly.
Yes.
Told my daughter she'd have more Twitter followers if she just would rename herself to McGurk Jr. like everybody knows her as. But anyways, all right. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight, and we will catch you next week, same time. Tell a new bro.
Yeah, tell new bros about it.